Hi there, I'm Kathleen Jasper, and today we're talking about teacher evaluations and a couple of things that you can do in the classroom to increase your score on those evaluations. Let's get started. All right, so teacher evaluation time comes around the second semester of school, somewhere around March to May. So many of you are preparing for that. And I wanted to share a little bit of insight with you today about my own experience being a teacher and being evaluated, and also being an assistant principal who conducted evaluations. I think both perspectives are very helpful and may help you do better on your evaluations. So quick story time. During my first year of teaching, I was doing pretty well. I was buried. I had a lot of work and I was still getting the hang of that. But I was really connecting with my students. I felt like I was delivering impactful instruction. We were doing all kinds of different things. My lesson plans were aligned to the standards, yada, yada, yada. So when it came time for evaluation, I was excited to have my principal come in and evaluate me. He had hired me on the spot because I was a runner and I was going to help coach cross country and track. And he gave me a chance and I was really grateful for that. So I wanted to show him that I was working hard and that I knew what I was doing. So when it came time for teacher evaluation time, he came in and observed me. And I thought it went really, really well. All of my students were engaged, which wasn't just for the evaluation. I had really great students and good classroom management because I was trained by some really good teachers. And so my kids did well. I was calling out questions. I was a biology teacher at the time. So I said, what are the 4 nitrogen bases of the DNA molecule? And they called it out. And I said, okay, when chromosomes line up in the middle of the cell, what's that called? And they called it out. And everybody seemed to be answering questions and everything was going well. So when he left, I felt really good about my instruction, my kids, everything. So then it came time for, the sit down after the evaluation, which is a really important part of the evaluation process. This is where we get our accolades, which teachers are very hungry for accolades because we don't get paid a lot and we work really hard, well past our contract hours to make instruction and the classroom and everything great, right? So we want somebody to tell us we're doing a good job. So I was waiting for that, and he did. Although my principal was a man of few words and not one to over pump your ego. He was someone who would tell you when you're making mistakes. And so he said, you're doing well here and there. And then he said, you need to cut down on the unison responses. And I didn't know what that was. And I was like, huh. And he could tell my confusion. And he said, when you ask a question, you don't wait for them to think about it. And you allow them to just call out in unison. So 3 or 4 kids will shout out the answer. That's called a unison response. And he said, the reason why that is problematic is because, number one, students who might need more time to think about that don't get that time because someone's already calling out the answer. Number 2, it's usually a response to low-level recall questions, which are those quick, recall the information. I ask you something and there's a one-word answer or a quick answer, right? Not a lot of critical thinking. And he also said that the same students over and over again will be the ones who answer the questions, the ones who are quick, the ones who are engaged. And that allows other students who are not as, adept at answering these questions to kind of retreat to the background and not have to do any of the work. And this was super eye-opening to me because I had never heard this. It was my first year teaching. And I just thought the fact that my kids were answering questions was good enough, right? So that really helped me become a better classroom teacher. I started to try to break that habit, which is a really hard habit to break. Because when we're standing in the front of the room and we're asking students questions, I don't like dead air. I don't want to hear silence. Silence makes me nervous. I want someone to rescue me and say the answer. And if I can't get someone to say the answer, I'll usually probe for it or hint at it, right? So one of the things that I did was I implemented the procedure of raising your hand before you answer a question. And it took about a week to break the kids and myself of this habit. So basically what I would do is before I asked a question, I would say, okay, I'm going to ask you a question. I don't want any answers yet. I want you to take 10 to 15 seconds and think about it, and then raise your hand. And we kept doing this over and over again until it became a habit. Now, when I really wanted my students to think critically about something, if I was asking a more advanced question about a process in biology or a function or how the structure of an organism relates to its function or something like that, I would say, I'm going to set a timer and I want you to think critically about this. And once you have it in your mind, I will then take volunteers to answer the question. This really helped me ask better questions, for one. It also elicited the engagement of other students who normally, like my principal said, retreated to the background and didn't want to raise their hand. They started feeling a little more comfortable to try. And it helped me see that I need to call on other students besides my high flyers and my my overachievers to answer these questions. And it really impacted my classroom instruction in a positive way. So if you are one who is relying on unison responses, students calling out and all of that, try to reframe your procedure for answering questions in the classroom and practice that and break that habit. It will make you a better instructor. So that feedback I got from my evaluation was gold. I became a better teacher because of that. Now, another thing that my principal was really keen on was learning objectives in the classroom. And I have seen tons of videos where teachers are upset because why do I have to write my learning target on the board? Why do I have to write my objective on the board? It does nothing. Well, you're right. It does nothing if it's just on the board. If all you're doing is writing the objective for the lesson on the board, you're absolutely right. It does nothing. But if you talk about that objective before learning takes place, you refer to that objective while learning is happening, and you go back and review that objective after learning is done to see if you've met that objective, then it becomes a very powerful tool in your classroom. And if you do that during your evaluation, that's going to make your evaluation that much better, and you're going to be a better teacher. So let me give you an example. Let's say, and I'll use biology as an example again. Let's say that we're doing cell functions, and I'm talking about the plasma membrane of the cell. So my learning objective might be something like students will identify the makeup of the plasma membrane or the components of the plasma membrane. So that's a level 1 question. You just name off all the things that the plasma membrane is made up of. That's a low level question. Maybe the second objective might be students will relate the plasma membrane structure to its function. So students will start to discuss how the plasma membrane moves and how it's permeable and all of that, and why that's important for the function of the cell. And then the third objective might be a little bit higher up. Notice we're moving up in terms of complexity of the objective. Maybe the third objective, and I'm making this up on the fly, the third objective is students will evaluate a situation where the plasma membrane does not work properly and what that outcome might be, where students have to predict based on what they already know about the plasma membrane and its components and function. What if it malfunctions? What can happen to the cell and ultimately the organism, right? That's high level. So we have 3 objectives: low, mid, high, right? So before learning takes place, I have them on the board because my principal wants me to have them on the board, but also because I want to review them. So I say, hey guys, listen up, or hey students, hey friends, hey folks, whatever you want to say. These are our 3 objectives today. By the end of the learning, we should be able to do these 3 things. So let's go over them. And I go down the line and talk about it. And then we start the lesson. So maybe I'm doing some direct instruction. Maybe we're reading from the book. Perhaps they're doing cooperative learning, whatever it is. And at any time where I feel like we've met the objective, I might say, hey, guys, let's take a look at this objective. Did we meet objective 1? Do we know the components of the plasma membrane? And they might raise their hand. Yeah, I think we do. Okay, what are they? All right. Anybody else have anything to add to that? Okay, great. We've met objective 1. Let's move to objective 2. Now we're going to talk about, what did I say? How those components help the cell plasma membrane function. All right. So now maybe they're working more intently on answering some questions or looking at a model or whatever it is. And maybe 5-10 minutes later, we meet that objective. And I say, okay, let's stop real quick. Have we met this objective? And we might discuss and talk about it and say, yeah, we did. We met the objective. All right, great. Well, now it's getting to the end of the lesson, right? And the third objective is really complex and it takes higher order thinking skills. And so they're working on it, they're working through their stuff. And I might say, all right, guys, we're about to be done with class. Let's talk about this third objective here. Did we meet this? Can you guys do this yet? And I might do a thumbs up, thumbs to the middle, or thumbs down, right? They might go, yeah, I totally can, or in the middle or down. And let's say they're in the middle. Most of them are in the middle or thumbs down. Then I could say, all right, let's revisit this objective tomorrow. We did meet objective 1, and let's review that real quick, and then we review it. We did meet objective 2, and let's talk about that. Objective 3 is a little more complex, so that's going to go to the top of my board tomorrow when we start class tomorrow. So don't worry about it. We'll get to that tomorrow. And if the principal is in your room watching you do this, not only are you just writing a learning target on the board, you're communicating that learning target, and you are talking the students through it. You're relating it to the learning. It's not just sitting there on your board. So don't be a negative Nelly and be like, oh, I don't know why we have to write these objectives. Research shows that when learning has objectives and targets, students are more inclined to meet those targets. When those targets are communicated, when those goals are communicated with students, students are more likely to meet those goals. The same with us. When we have clear-cut goals written down, we are more likely to meet those goals. If they're just some abstract thing out in the universe somewhere, we're probably not going to meet those objectives or goals. So communicate them, show them to the students, maybe have them write them down, continually refer to them. That's going to really raise your scores on your evaluations. And more importantly, it's going to make you a better teacher. Now, I will tell you, as an assistant principal, I did a lot of classroom walkthroughs. And when I saw things like this, I just got really excited because it shows that when teachers take the time to give students wait time before they answer a question, like we talked about in the first part of this video, I know how hard that can be. So when I see a teacher standing up in the front of the room and saying, all right, guys, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to think about this. Nobody raise their hand. Nobody talk about it yet. I want to give you time to think about it. And there's that dead air in the classroom and the teacher waits them out. I find that to be a really effective teacher. And so I will definitely bump the score. And of course, if I see teachers referring to the learning objective and not just having the objective written from last week and the week before just to satisfy some requirement by the district, when they're referring to the objectives, talking about the objectives, referring to the standards, talking to the students about the standards, that is something that I found to be really, really valuable. And I would always bump the score based on that. All right. So the 2 things you should do is avoid unison responses and give students wait time when questioning. And the second thing you can do is write the objectives on the board, but refer to those objectives when teaching. I guarantee that if you do those 2 things, you will impress your principal. And also be open to feedback from your principal. I know it's hard sometimes to take criticism, and especially something so personal as teaching, but just that piece of criticism my principal gave me, and he gave a lot of criticism, especially when I became his assistant principal. He definitely told me what I was doing wrong. But when I took that feedback, I became a better instructor. And so be open to the feedback, be willing to make changes in your classroom, and just, have an open mind when you go in and you are talking about your evaluation with your principal. All right, that's all for today. Good luck on your teacher evaluations. If you have any comments or questions, you can put them in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Thank you so much and have a great day.